This scene right here is just so shameless that I just, as you can see, I started laughing. Just like looking at this scene again, I was just like, oh my goodness, just hearing the VA work behind this scene and hearing like Sylphie, just this character that is like this bubble of just innocence. Like that is the impression you get of Sylphie from her character introduction to where we're at now. And this episode completely shatters that bubble of innocence that many probably thought Sylphie was after they watch this, because seeing her just straight up say like this line word for word, and Rudy can be crude sometimes, so he might ask, how many kids do you want? And as she continues to say this, she's like, oh, you can put in as many as you want. Like, she literally says this. That'll be crude too, and say, oh, Rudy, how many do you want to put in me? It's like, bro, what? And like, I love the princess's face, like her shock, her realization. Like if you do like a zoom in frame on her face, the shock and realization of just this girl that seems so innocent is just so depraved and has such I guess, a lot of lewd thoughts going on within her head, more than we actually realized, is just pretty hilarious. Like, legit, I know this episode caught many by surprise, and many are going to probably see the subtitles of this scene and instantly assume that this is an edit. Because, like, let's be honest here, like, when you see subtitles like this, you'll see people do meme edits and stuff for anime, change the bubbles, the dialogue bubbles or whatever for manga, but this legitimately is unedited, and this is what Sylphie actually says in this episode, and it's legitimately like, huh? Like, and just the way she just talks about it, like, she's just getting all excited and talking about it's like squirming around and just like, yeah, I think we now understand, just see how much in tune Rudy and Sylphie really are as characters after just this whole little moment that she had with the princess. It's just, like I said, it really just gives a whole new layer to her character. Now, besides that, let's actually dive a little bit deeper into this episode, okay? So, majority of this episode, honestly, is basically Sylphie working up the courage to finally talk with Rudy. That's the big, important part of this episode, the main objective that this episode tries to settle, so to speak. And I think this is good, because obviously we're getting closer and closer to the conclusion. For instance, as you can see here, this is like episode 11 of Mushoku Tensei, season 2, and as we know, Core 1 is going to be 12 to 13 episodes. And basically, that means we only have a few episodes left until the conclusion of Core 1, and we're going to have to wait until next year before Season 2, Core 2 actually comes out. So it's going to be a little wait. But I think that this plot point kind of being settled with this episode, it's a nice little ribbon on top for Core 1, because a lot of people, ever since starting Season 2, have been like, they wanted to see Sylphie and Rudy have this connection rekindled once again, and obviously this episode does showcase that. Rudy and Sylphie have rekindled their relationship. They are together once again. It's a legitimately beautiful episode. It is. I mean, pushing aside the memes, the jokes, etc., it's a nice episode because it demonstrates a few things that got us here. And I've talked about this already in my episode reviews, but I think it's actually very important. One detail in particular is that, just as how Rudy lacked confidence in himself, and, it's led to his ED, his PTSD, and all sorts of other problems he's had throughout Season 2, Sylphie also had some, I guess, overall inferiority, or she felt like she wasn't ready. She was scared. She had confidence issues, so to speak, to where, like, she could not stand up and reveal herself to Rudy. She didn't want to face rejection. She didn't want to feel like she was forgotten about, because she harbored a lot of feelings for Rudy ever since she was a kid. And now that a lot of time has passed since then, she was worried that, Rudy would have forgotten about her. Rudy would have moved on or had someone else he was with. She was legitimately fearful, scared, and she really was worried about being completely rejected and just, being alone. And Rudy, as a character, as we know, he's been experiencing very similar feelings. He felt like, he was getting rejected by everyone, he couldn't really make friends, so he kept people at a distance continuously, at least in the early stages of Season 2, and, he slowly kind of opened up his shell, and after many, many months of interacting with, like, Zenoba, interacting with, the Beast Tribe, interacting with, now Fitz or Sylphie, he's opened up. And this reveal is basically a better time than ever because, they both revealed their secrets to each other. For instance, Rudy, was letting his guard down, and also Sylphie let her guard down, and they told each other who they really were, etc. And as we could see, that bond is forming within this episode, at least at the end of the episode. And another detail to actually talk about is the fact that Sylphie, as a character, she has to make a very important decision here, because her revealing herself to Rudy basically means that she might have to stop being the princess's guard. That's definitely the significant impact of what this episode kind of brings to the table, is because ever since she took the name Fitz, she has been hiding her identity, dressing up kind of like a guy, and just trying to remain as this silent individual. But now that, this whole event has happened with Rudy and Sylphie now, that's not going to be as easy, especially if Rudy doesn't reject her and he goes out with her and she becomes his girlfriend, which, let's be honest here, just looking at everything the way this episode is presented, it definitely leads to that conclusion. Basically, these two will be together and they're going to form a romantic couple. That's what the episode definitely implies. The whole cave sequence is basically kind of like a reenactment of the early stuff in Season 2 with Sarah. FYI, if you've forgotten, when Sarah was, introduced and we had that brief moment in the cave with Rudy and, Sarah, basically, there was a moment where Rudy could have went all the way, etc. He obviously didn't, and then, eventually Rudy could have had another chance, and then he didn't, which led to performance issues, all this type of stuff, which led to his ED and PTSD and rejection and all that. And the fact that, something very similar is happening here, but with Sylphie, pretty much shows that Rudy has slightly overcome his issues, and, he is, not being rejected. He doesn't feel rejected. He feels like, it is time. I like that. Obviously, the big elephant in the room, no pun intended, hasn't been talked about, for instance, the ED problem, but the thing is that this episode allows Rudy to build a bond with someone from the ground up once again and tell them how he truly feels. It's a very beautiful moment, and I love this. It's a great character building moment between the two individuals, and the voice actors definitely deliver their lines. I also especially love the silence of this scene, and I think that's what makes it very impactful as well, because typically, you have music and all that type of stuff, very low music playing in the background for scenes like this, but there was no music. It was just the fire crackling and basically off the cave walls to Sylphie and Rudy's voice actor talking. And I think because of just that silent nature of the scene, it felt very intimate, very immersive, and it allowed these, these moments to really just kind of capture you. You're like, wow, this is actually happening within the story of Mushoku Tensei. Now, moving on, I want to talk about something very important about this scene that can kind of fly over everybody's heads if they're not really taking a lot of time to think about it, because there's quite a few bombshells throughout this episode. But one thing that really showcases the growth in Rudy's character is that if he was himself, in Season 1, he would have thought about his feelings, his personal fulfillment more than anyone else. Like, think about it like this, okay? Obviously, Rudy's entire objective throughout, Season 2 has been trying to fix his ED problem. That's the whole point of what's been going on. And we already had kind of a conversation about this at the end of the last episode. But Rudy basically admitted that, he didn't want to force himself onto Fitz, or now Sylphie, and to fix his problem, he would find his own way, but he now knows that, it could be fixed to some degree. It's not completely hopeless. So it did give him hope. But basically, if he wanted to fix his problem, there's other dark, depraved ways that Rudy probably could have done something. If this was Season 1 Rudy, he might have just thought about his own personal fulfillment over anything else. But the fact that he didn't act on those actions and get very perverted with Fitz or Sylphie definitely means just how he has a lot of restraint and he cares about Fitz's well-being, or now Sylphie, because what better demonstrates this in this entire scene to where, like, he needs to dry off clothes and stuff, and he's like, oh, I can't, undress in front of Fitz, and at the same time, he's like, oh, if you don't want me to see you change all that, I'll turn around, I'll make a separate room. There was many opportunities, basically, for Rudy to go beyond his current relationship with Fitz and try to fix his ED. But he still, at the end of the day, thought of Fitz, or now Sylphie, as more important, which is she was in this moment, and always will be. But the point of the matter is that he could have felt about his own selfish desires, but he didn't. And I think that, like I said, says a lot about his character, that he didn't want to face rejection, but he also wanted to build a proper relationship. So just shout outs to really good character development and characterization, because I feel like this is a really impactful scene that demonstrates that, he was thinking of others over himself. So let's move on to this scene with Sylphie and Rudy traveling through the snow in this forest to get to their destination. It kind of showcases the experience of Rudy and the lack of experience from Sylphie when it comes to being an adventurer. Because hell, Rudy traveled most of his childhood as an adventurer, and he survived very harsh conditions that no normal individual would be able to. And he did. He came out on top, and he has a lot of skill and expertise thanks to that, the knowledge he's gained over the years, and he demonstrates that perfectly within this episode. Basically saying because of, how much he's adventured and the connections he's made, he's able to use those at his disposal to be able to, pull off a mission or a request or whatever pretty easily. He also basically wants to over-prepare because he's like, there's never a problem about over-preparing for a quest when, you can encounter something like a dragon, maybe the dragon god, who really knows. And like I said, it showcases the readiness and that Rudy takes adventuring very seriously, and that is not something that you could just go on and just do and not think about the consequences, because you can easily die doing it. And I mean, we've seen these repercussions as well in Season 1, where there was a few adventurers that got completely destroyed by monsters because they got in over their head, not really thinking or planning, just to get glory, and they died. Rudy knows this, and obviously those skills are really ingrained in his mind, and so he really was wanting to take extra precaution, especially since we know he cares for Fitz even before he found out Fitz was Sylphie, and he didn't want Fitz to get hurt in any way. And so he decided to be very diligent, think about it, and even throughout this situation, he realizes with the rain clouds and stuff going on, he says in his own mind, even within this episode, most likely someone was tampering with the quest or whatever, trying to do something with the weather. For all he knew, there could have been assassins after Fitz and him. So he was on guard and ready, and it shows, once again, his attention to detail. He was trying to care about the situation and figuring out the best way to, make sure nobody got injured. So yeah, legit, this is a really good episode. There's a lot of details here and there throughout the episode. There's just great stuff, great little segments, and I really love what this episode does. Like, it legitimately is a beautiful episode between two characters and all that. It's a very slow episode, not like a crazy amount of content happened, but once again, it's like a nice little conclusion to this plot between Sylphie and Rudy, and they finally are being able to face each other without running away and be who they really are. It's a very blessed sequence of events. So I want to leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content and you want more of my videos to appear in your YouTube feed, do subscribe and hit that like button down below. But with that, be safe, stay healthy, Chibi out.